I don't like the word fight, but it definitely feels like a fight sometimes. But I wish I had the fortitude to advocate for myself the way that you are, because a year or two after my divorce, I realized I should have advocated harder for a better settlement.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to walk away, is never to have that regret, whether you have kids or whether you don't. But if you advocate for what's fair and equitable, that may be the very thing that gives you what you need to move on and not have to financially be desolate.
Welcome to the Divorce Discussions Podcast, where professionals share practical guidance to help you move through divorce with clarity and confidence. Let's get into the discussion. One of the most unsettling feelings during divorce is wondering if you're seeing the full picture, especially when it comes to finances. You might be finding yourself asking questions like, are all the accounts being disclosed? What happens if something's being hidden? Or even, how do I know where to begin with the information I need for a fair decision? These are incredibly stressful questions, and unfortunately, they come up more often than people expect during divorce. So if you're feeling this way and navigating divorce with these questions, don't worry, you have found the perfect episode to listen to. My guest today, Becky Sampson, is going to help you gain clarity, empowerment, and advice on how to get all of the information you need. Becky is the founder and CEO of Only Subpoenas, and after 21 hearings, 21 subpoenas, and 3.5 years in Hawaiian family court system, facing 5 attorneys and representing herself, not because she wanted to, but she had to for most of it, and she won. Not just any win, but a fair and equitable outcome for both parties while keeping an open heart. She since then has been affectionately known as Becky Brockovich. Now she helps others navigate the legal system with strength and clarity so they too can stand up for what's fair and walk away empowered. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Becky.
Oh, thank you for having me, Angie. This is a lot of fun. I always love talking about this subject.
Yes, and I'm so excited to bring this subject and this information to the listeners who, again, may be in all different stages of divorce, because I don't think subpoenas and this type of information is shared out there very readily. So really where I want to start is, let's be honest, Becky, when we hear the word subpoena, it can be a little scary because we see these on crime shows and congressional hearings and dramatic court scenes. Not really necessarily everyday civil cases like divorce is what they're thought of. So can you explain to the listeners exactly what is a subpoena, and is it that scary?
Okay, well, so let me just first start off by saying I am not an attorney. So this is not legal advice. I'm just going to share with you what a subpoena is, and kind of why I'm even in this field, because I didn't know anything about the legal system. I've been married. I've been divorced not just once, but twice. And it was my second divorce that I really learned how to do this. And it was really because my husband at the time, his attorney sent me a subpoena, and he was asking for bank records. And I'm like, well, then why didn't you just ask me for it? I'd give you them instead of subpoenaing it. And so I turned to this attorney that I was working with at the time, and he's like, Becky, well, now you have the template. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, stop asking for what you need because he's not giving it to you. Go subpoena it. So what a subpoena is it's an actual court order. So in order for someone to produce documents, or it could be a testimony, or it could be to turn over records for like working with a guardian ad litem or something like that. So oftentimes subpoenas are not something that they're a little bit more of an aggressive move when it comes to the court system, and you usually don't start with them. It usually comes after you've done something called discovery, which is, hey, I need these bank records. Let's say you get divorced or you're separated, and maybe one person has all of the bank information and the other person doesn't. Well, you both are entitled to have all that information in order to settle for a fair and equitable division. And so what if you, through your attorney or on your own, ask for that information and that other party doesn't give it to you? So that's called discovery.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give it to you. Oftentimes people do a motion to compel. They'll go back to the court and say, hey, Your Honor, they didn't provide me these bank records. And usually the the judge or commissioner or somebody says, hey, Mr. So and so or Mrs. So and so, you need to provide that. Now, usually it goes back in the ping pong back and forth and back and forth. I always say stop asking for permission and just go get the information you need, because a subpoena goes directly to that bank, goes
Mhm.
directly to the source. It doesn't. And I remember somebody calling me one time going, well, how's he going to get all that information? I said, no, no, no. The subpoena doesn't go to your husband. It goes to the bank.
Mm,
And the bank, because it's a court order, they have to comply by that or they are in contempt of court.
yeah.
So, and usually that takes like 2 to 3 weeks. You usually give them that, depends on the jurisdiction, and then they'll be able to send you back all the information that you're asking for. Now, of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that. However, that's the simple part of it is go get it. Whatever you need in order um, to make your case or the evidence that you need, the documentation to make the decisions and get in front of the judge and say, hey, here's all the information.
Okay. So thank you for explaining all of that. So it's not necessarily as scary as we may think it is. It's
Mm-mm.
just really at the bottom of everything. It is just getting the information that we need. And as you stated, you said, it's not necessarily the first step that I would tell people to do. Can you give maybe one or two scenarios where someone who's listening maybe wants to go talk about getting a subpoena based on their situation? Maybe just some flags that may come up for them to know if it's the right
Yeah,
move?
so let me just kind of say, I was pro se. I was representing myself for most of my case. Now, eventually, I ended up getting an attorney, and at that point, I had already done 21 subpoenas. And he's like, "How did you get all these subpoenas back?" Because sometimes it's very often the case that you put a subpoena out, and it's like one out of every three subpoenas, even if they're coming out of an attorney's office, get rejected. Well, I got all of mine accepted, other than one because of it was another situation. But and so I want to talk to maybe on two different sides. If you're pro se and you're representing yourself, make sure that you have some legal people helping you through that process, because you don't want to do it the wrong way. There's two ways. You have to, if you're pro se, you go through the court, right, to get it signed. So you go through a court clerk to issue the subpoena. If you're working with an attorney, the attorney is the one that issues the subpoena. They don't have to go to the court. They have that right to sign the subpoena, and it's now a court order, basically, to comply. So it's interesting. I get calls all the time, Angie, that um, people that are calling me, or they have attorneys and they're like, my attorney isn't doing the subpoenas that they need to do, or they're being delayed, or they got rejected, or something like that. Can you help me? And this is the situation. I'm realizing that there's a little bit, I don't ever want to step on an attorney's toes. Okay. I don't want the attorney to feel like I'm taking business from them or doing their job for them. However, because I'm not a legal professional and I'm not a legal paralegal, I'm just really, really good at what I do.
Mhm.
I work directly underneath the attorney to do that. So it's very careful with the way that we handle that. But I'm here to support the attorney in helping them get those subpoenas done. It doesn't mean that they can't do them on their own. However, they do usually, our divorce attorneys are up to here in paperwork and all kinds of stuff. And subpoenas require a little bit of detail. They require actually a lot of detail to make sure that you don't get them rejected. So I would say if that's something that you are struggling getting the information, just make a list of the people, and subpoenas, you don't need to have all the information. That's another thing I really want people to know. You don't have to know what their account numbers are. You don't need to know that kind of things. There's ways of getting the subpoena to go through and the information back without all of the information on that subpoena.
Okay. Very interesting and good to know. And I know we've had conversations about that as well, as like you love to partner with lawyers because again, they're already so overloaded with work, and subpoenas can take time. And so you really help lighten that burden of doing the work for the subpoena, so that again, you can work together collaboratively with the attorney to get the desired outcome. And that's something that we are so passionate about at the Divorce Support Collective, is, really finding professionals who want to stay in their lane but also can work and support each other,
Yep.
to help their clients. Because again, we talk a lot about throughout other episodes on this podcast too, about how it's really essential for us to build up a support team for people going through a divorce, not just saying you just need a lawyer, you just need a mediator, you just need a therapist. Like, they all have very important roles in your divorce process. So again, I know we already kind of talked about how subpoenas are not necessarily this really scary thing, but you did say it is a little bit more of an aggressive approach. So I'm worried that, what if a listener is tuning in right now and thinking, okay, I do think that a subpoena is the next step because I want to be able to make sure I have all the information. But if I do this, I am scared that it's going to become this super high conflict situation with my soon to be ex. Is that always the case once a subpoena is put in?
Um, like I said, it's not, I wouldn't recommend, look, my degree is in conflict resolution, mediation, and peace building. And I was actually getting that degree when I was going through my divorce. So you can imagine my divorce was very, very contested. There was all kinds of things that, I mean, I was with him less than 2 years, but it took us 3.5 years to get through the court. And granted, I was learning along the way. I knew nothing
Right.
when I started. And so for me, I look back and there was 8 or 9, 10 months that, again, we did the discovery. He wouldn't provide, motion to compel. He still wouldn't provide, motion to compel. And I started seeing that pattern. And if you have an attorney and you're going through that, every single time that attorney goes back to court to do that motion to compel is costing you a lot of money, not only for them to draft it up, but then send it to the other party, then go in front of the judge, whether it's in person, that's a lot more expensive than they need to do than online. And you're having to pay all of that. And it could be anywhere from, I don't know, $300 to $1,000 to do a motion to compel, could be. And I'm thinking, well, why don't I just invest the money in doing a subpoena? And most subpoenas, especially if you stay in the lane of financials, you're asking for just the basic. I just want to know what the bank account is. I just want to know where all the money's going. I want to know where the money has been. Just the basic stuff. There's not, I can't guarantee anything, but most judges won't quash. It's called quashing, which means that they stop that subpoena from being able to be issued.
Mm.
Um, they usually won't do that just because this is you're asking for reasonable information. So you can still stay. When I was doing my subpoenas, I was working so hard to keep my heart soft and not escalate things, but I needed the information. And
Mhm.
I'd always say that to his attorney, is I need the information in order to settle for a fair and equitable division. This isn't about taking him for everything he has, because I think that's what he thought I was doing, but that wasn't. I just wanted the numbers. And especially if people are working with forensics, I can't tell you how many forensic accountants that I've talked to. They're like, yes, Becky, we just need the information in order to do their job,
Yeah.
and to be able to get that. So yeah, it, but at some point, it's their actions or inactions that are causing you to get to that point, or else you'll just be ping ponging for years in the court system because they're like, oh, sorry, the discovery. And those discoveries, there are deadlines to those discovery where you get to a certain point where you no longer can do any subpoenas. So that's something to be really aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Again, great information. I have a few more questions, but I want to dig into this keeping your heart soft. Because
Mhm.
again, going through divorce, it's a very emotional time. The emotions can come out of nowhere. And then let's add in, if we are going down the route of the subpoenas and trying to get more information because we feel like stuff is being hidden, it's not unreasonable to feel a little hardened and a little resentful. So, can you give some
Absolutely.
practical tips or suggestions to our listeners if they're finding themselves in that spot of like, I want to keep an open heart and a soft heart, but it's really, really hard?
Well, So early on in my divorce, I was taking my peace building classes, and one of the books that they had me read was Anatomy of Peace.
Mm.
And it talked, I remember I was walking, so my divorce was in Hawaii. We moved there shortly after we got married because he got a job and then he left the island. I served him divorce papers there. And so I stayed there during the whole divorce thing. And I was walking down the street in downtown Honolulu and I was listening to my book because I knew I was about to start this class and I'd read it before, but I wanted to read it again. And one of the things that it talked about is, do you have a heart of war or do you have a heart of peace? And I remembered I was so mad at his attorney because of all the things that they had turned into the court and which I knew was not true. Okay. Like I knew it was all these personal attacks to me. And I remember walking by an ABC store and I thought, okay, Becky, if I was definitely had a heart of war at that point.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, how can I shift this to a heart of peace? And I looked at the ABC store, which is, if anyone's been to Honolulu, it's like it's like a 7-Eleven. It's kind of like a little convenience store. And I looked over there and I walked in and I thought, I'm just going to buy a little bag of chocolates, and drop it off at his attorney's office with the papers that I was walking to his attorney's office. So I go up this big old business building or something, and I leave it outside the door. And I will tell you, he sent me an email that day, and he was a bit of a bulldog.
Mm.
Okay, so at first I was kind of really ready to fight, but he sent me a thing. He goes, "Were those chocolates from you?" And I said, "Yeah." And from that time on, even though, I mean, he has a job to represent him and do stuff, but I just felt like there was a shift that
Mm.
happened in me and in him to be able to go, okay, I know your client is very difficult. I'm divorcing him. And I changed the way that I saw him. And I knew he had two young kids. And I realized, okay, he's just doing his job. He's just probably doing and writing things in there that are being told to him, which aren't true. So I don't want to go to war with his attorney. I need to make peace as much as I can. And also, the day that I dropped my, at that time, my husband at the airport, dropped him off, and I knew he was going to be served the papers. I just said a little prayer in my heart and I said, please, God, keep my heart soft towards him and towards other men
Mm.
in my life, because I knew that if I allowed him to take that part of me, it would ruin me.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that it was easy. There were times that I went into class in my peace building classes, and and I was ready to write horrible emails to his attorney. And all of a sudden, we'd have a class that day about how we communicate with people and how we show up and our come from and everything matters. And I just wanted to get through this high conflict divorce as quickly as I could. And it was dragging on forever. So I always say to people, the more that you understand, and I actually just finished a podcast today with somebody where we talked about coercive abuse in the
Mm.
legal system. And that's exactly what I experienced. And we talked about this, about the more you understand how that other person that is high conflict thinks,
Mm.
then the less I can make it about me,
Yeah.
because they just think differently. They just want to destroy me. He was trying to basically get me to give up. He was trying to he was trying to bleed me out, basically, out of the legal system. And I had to first take care of my own personal care. And because that's like something, when I coach people in divorce, I'm like, what's your self-care look like? Because this is going to be a rocky, rocky road, especially if you're dealing with high conflict.
Yeah.
And you do not want to be destroyed through it. So I love to empower people through that process. And so, yeah, I mean, can I do the subpoenas, but can I do them from a place of love and
Yeah.
a love for myself and also fairness?
Yeah.
I
Well,
did.
I think you bring up a really interesting point too, which again we talk a lot about, and I do this in my parent practice as well with co-parents, is we need to really focus on what can we control and what we can't control. So we
Exactly.
can control our emotions, our outcomes, our reactions, as hard as it is sometimes, and we don't always get them perfect, but we cannot control what the other person is doing, what our
Mm-mm.
soon-to-be ex is doing, their emotions, their reactions, their behaviors. And that sometimes is a very hard pill to swallow. But in the end, the more that we can focus on, okay, how can I move forward? How am I going to represent myself with all of these different areas?
Yeah.
It's going to be a better outcome than if we are constantly thinking, well, why did they do that? And, coming up with assumptions and all of that kind of stuff. So
Well,
I
I've
appreciate
been
that you
a
said that.
I've been a life coach for a really long time. I during coming out of my first divorce, I lost 130 pounds, hit my goal weight, quit my job, and got divorced for the first time in my life. And so I had a total life reset.
Yeah.
And at that point, I realized, and I remember my first husband was always like, "Why are you so thankful for me?" And I'm like, "Well, I finally got to that point of gratitude for what I had gone through." And so this was no different, even though I was dealing with a much higher conflict in the legal system. But I tried to look at it going, okay, this divorce is happening for me. It's not
Hmm.
happening to me. And if it's not happening to me, then what am I supposed to be learning? How can I become stronger? How can I um, be more loving? And really what helped me see it is, we talked about it in my classes all the time, is that not seeing the other person as an object. He's a real person. He's probably reacting the way that he's reacting in the legal system because he really truly believes that I'm wanting to take everything that he's ever worked for, which was never the truth. But I can't control how he thinks. I
Hmm.
can't control that he feels that way. All I can do is do what I need to do to not escalate it and stay as calm as I can by still holding my boundaries, by subpoenaing, getting the information, talking to the professionals around me so that I can finish off strong,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. Okay, let's go back a little bit to the subpoena. So,
Yeah.
if there's someone in divorce who feels like, oh gosh, I just don't think they're showing me everything or they're hiding information, what documents can help reveal the truth? Is it just the bank statement that we need, or are there other things that the listener should be considering?
Well, I can just tell you what was important for me. I always say to people, and this is what I did, is I always look at what information do you need to make the right decision and to know the full picture. Now, do you need to have the full picture, every single penny accounted for to settle? No, but you need to know what's important to you. And for me, it was retirement accounts. It was I needed to know something called marital waste.
Mm.
Once you're under a financial restraining order, which most states have that, right? So once the papers go into the courts, you're under a financial restraining order. You're not allowed to move money here and hide money here and cash out here. And now, do people do it all the time? Yes, they do it all the time. And do they turn in financial statements that aren't correct and they lie under oath? Basically, they're saying penalty of perjury. This is exactly what my expenses are and my income. Yes, they lie all the time. And do they typically, get in trouble for that? No. My experience, again, I'm not an attorney. I can't tell you yes or no, but don't be surprised by that. But if you do need to, your case, if you're going to make a case like I did, I was like, okay, what information do I need? I started writing down what's all the information I would need in order to make my case in front of the judge. Let's say I do go to court and actually have to argue my side. What information do I need? And then who has that information that I can go subpoena?
Mm.
So I say first what information you need, where do I need to go get it, and when do I need to go get it? Being aware of, my case. So for mine, actually mine part of it was going to get his records for a past employment. That
Mm.
wouldn't be something normal, but I needed to prove to the court, hey, he took this job in Hawaii under false pretense.
Yeah.
So that was something that I went and subpoenaed. But that's not normal in a divorce case. I also got communications because I needed to show certain behaviors that were happening.
Mm.
But yeah, that's something that you would work with, obviously, with an attorney to be able to strategize, or a divorce coach to say, hey, this might be some things that you might want to go look for, or ask for in discovery first and then go look for. Some of the attorneys that I've interviewed on my podcast have said you don't necessarily have to do discovery to go to subpoenas. However, um, doing discovery and asking first before you go to the subpoenas does show the courts that you are in good faith doing the best that you can without involving the courts. And they do appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good tidbit. And I'm glad that you added in that last part because I was going to ask, like, again, going through a divorce, someone might just be so overwhelmed with, like, there's so many things and I don't even know where to start and I don't know what I need. And so you're saying if they're in that position of like, I don't think that everything is being shown. However, I just don't know where to start. Talk to your lawyer, talk to your divorce coach. Those are going to be the best places to go first.
Yeah, and also forensics. I mean, most of these attorneys have, if they don't do so a forensic accountant, especially if you're dealing with someone that's moving stuff all around, or if you have a business, because oftentimes they like to hide stuff within a business. A really good forensics accountant, and what that means is that they look at all of the information, all the bank records. They can track where things are going. Then they can track to that bank, and then they subpoena that bank. And then, so if you need to go that, now obviously that's a more expensive route, but there's there's several people that have contacted me recently that they're having to do that. They're having to work with forensics, and that's not usually something an attorney would do. That's a forensics person that really dives in there and gets. But I mean, I'm connected to some really good ones. You probably are as well.
Yeah.
And they're worth their money, and for sure.
Yeah. So we talked again a little bit about how this is not necessarily the first step in what we want to do. We don't want to, do the first meeting and say, all right, here's where I want all the stuff subpoenaed from. But I would love for you just to share maybe a story of a client that you've worked with maybe they've been in the middle of the divorce, like some of our listeners right now, and really the subpoena is what helped get to the case or the decree signed sooner rather than later.
Well, I'm gonna share my story with that, because a lot of the people that are calling me recently have been people who need those subpoenas, and sometimes they're having a difficult time getting them through the attorneys. But I'm going to tell you the reason why I am in this business is because I truly, truly believe that there's two reasons. One, subpoenas can give you the right information. But the second thing is that it creates leverage, meaning a lot of these people who are trying to hide things, and I often say, look, they may be trying to hide it, but it doesn't mean that the assets are hidden.
Mm,
Okay. So when you go and expose them like I did, and I got everything on the table, and I could have sworn we were going to go to trial. And we spent hours preparing for it. We had 10 binders of paperwork. I worked with my attorney at that point. I had an attorney. And the night before, we stayed up late and got everything ready. And we settled the day of settlement, or sorry, the day of the trial, 5 minutes into it. Now, I will say, if you think that you're going to go to trial, statistically, 95 to 97% of all divorce cases settle before they go to trial.
hmm
Okay. I've had so many attorneys even my guest this morning said that exact thing. So you think they're going to go there. But for me, I think that the fact that I subpoenaed as much and had all the information out there, and I had it all empowered, I empowered myself with the information that created the settlement. And the settlement was a lot more than what my attorney and his attorney
Right.
and the judge thought that he would settle for.
Wow.
So I truly believe in full disclosure.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't go crazy, because there was a couple things that I just wasn't able to get, because however, all I wanted was the increase from the time that we got married to the time we get divorced. That's all I wanted. And typically that's what most people are entitled, especially if it's a second divorce. If it's a long-term divorce, there's just so much. And a lot of women I'm not going to say it only happens to women. You probably have seen this too. And I say this all the time. I'm now married for the third time and very happily married. However, my husband, after 27 and a half years, was left with 21 cents in the bank. So I know 21 subpoenas, 21 hearings, and my husband was left with 21
Got
cents.
to be your lucky number.
I know, I'm saying this truthfully because I've seen his bank records and I've also done the forensics on those bank records. So it happens to men as well.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate for at least know your rights, at least know, and then you can make decisions if you want to go after it or if you want to stand up and advocate for yourself in that way, or there's other things that you want, hey, I'll walk away from that if you let me have my kids, or whatever it is, but at least you're empowered with all the information that you need.
Yeah. I love that. Now, one question that I thought of, and you kind of just hit on it a little bit, that I wanted to just get your input on, is that we know not every single divorce involves kids. It doesn't mean that they've had kids, but is there anything that co-parents or soon to be co-parents should think about differently in terms of subpoenas than maybe a couple marrying or divorcing who do not have kids?
Well, I was not able to have kids, so that wasn't part of my divorce. But I will tell you, when I was going through my divorce, I had several people reach out to me and said, Becky, I wish I had the fortitude and the strength to advocate. I don't like the word fight, but it definitely feels like a fight
Yeah.
sometimes. But I wish I had the fortitude to advocate for myself the way that you are, because a year or two after my divorce, I realized I should have advocated harder for a better settlement.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to walk away, is never to have that regret, whether
Mm,
you have kids or whether you don't. But if you advocate for what's fair and equitable, that may be the very thing that gives you what you need to move on and not have to like financially be desolate.
yeah.
The record or the statistic out there is 44% of women coming out of divorce end up in financial poverty. And
Mm.
I always say, not on my watch. like like I truly believe that the reason why that happens is because they don't know what their rights are, and
Mm.
they don't know how to advocate for themselves, or they don't feel the strength. They don't feel like they're strong enough. And so it goes back to what you said at the very beginning. Get your team around you, the reinforcements, the divorce coach. It may feel overwhelmed, but when you get the right people, the tribe around you to say, hey, Becky, there's no back door. You're going forward. I'm not going to let you fail and give up, because there's so many times that I didn't think I could go on. I didn't think I could keep going. And I'm so glad I stuck with it.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say one more thing, Angie, if that's okay. If you're dealing with a high conflict divorce, and I always like to add this to it, and you're fighting, you might be doing all the subpoenas and maybe you got a settlement and maybe they did settle with you and you're dealing with that really difficult person. Just because that you got a settlement does not mean that they pay the bill.
Mm.
And so keep that in mind, because a lot of people think, oh, we settled, or if I settle for this amount, this is all going to go away.
Yeah.
No, it took me another year and a half to fight in the court system, in a different court system, because I had to domesticate it in a different place, to fight for that payment, because he never paid me a dime.
Mm.
And so people don't normally think about that. They think, oh no, they're just going to do what they say they're going to do. But if they're that difficult to begin with, they
Yeah.
probably will be difficult collecting.
Yeah.
And for me, I just eventually, instead of going back and forth, I eventually just got a judgment from the judge and then enforced that judgment through foreclosure of a house.
Mm.
And people don't think about that. And I didn't either.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this is over. But no, no.
Yeah. Well, Becky, you shared so much good information today, and I appreciate you coming on and just sharing some light in the whole world of subpoenas and how they can be beneficial and kind of when to implement them. Really, the last question, and again, you kind of just hit on it, is that at the Divorce Support Collective, yes, we are all about building up your support team and really having the professionals that are not just going to support you, but honestly save you money in the long run, because you don't want to be using, just your lawyer. There's other people to support you in different ways because divorce is financial, it's legal, but it's also very highly emotional. So for the listeners who are tuned in, what are two professionals that you feel everyone should have going through a divorce?
Honestly, having somebody that can be impartial. That usually, I find that if attorneys have a harder time explaining to you all your rights, right? So, and you also don't want to pay them. They're very expensive to explain what your rights are. So a divorce coach is definitely somebody that can at least, can't give you legal advice, but they may be able to share with their own experience. Or like when people reach out to me, I go, okay, what state are you in? Let's go look at your statute in your particular state. What resources are out there so that you can research? I'm sorry, I usually have it here, but if they go to my website, beckysampson.com, they can download, I think it's on there. They can download the 100 divorce terms. So I always recommend people, if you read divorce terms and it explains to you what each divorce term is so that you are educated about, we don't go to school to learn how the courts work. We don't know what a motion is. We don't know what a subpoena is. We don't know what custody battle is, or we don't know what custody time is differently from parental time and parental alienation. And we don't know all those vocabulary words. So the more entitled, the more empowered you are or educated, that you become more empowered. So a divorce coach can really lead you in that. And also, I am very careful with who I put in my circle of influence. I don't want people that are going, oh yeah, you're a victim, Becky. Look what he did to you. And was I human? And did I have people that I knew that I could call during that time? But I needed more people to going, hey, Becky, have you considered this?
Yeah.
Have you considered that? And maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to go out on the beach and go for a swim. And maybe having somebody that's not always like because that's something we talk about in conflict resolution is that we can even have the tribe around us escalating the conflict. And you don't want to do that. So I would be super, super careful with the people that you surround yourself with and let them be some people that are grounded in true principles. And especially when it comes to keeping your heart soft, that can help you give you perspective to go, okay, it's okay to feel that for a little bit, but let's release it. It's okay. You're valid. Because it's not, but I will say, here's what I will say, Angie, is that I always love to tell people there is this beautiful life after divorce. There really is. And you get to create whatever you want. You get to have the love of your life, which I never thought I'd be married again. And I truly, truly am in a true partnership and a beautiful man because I made that commitment that day to keep my heart open, not only to my husband at the time, but for all other men. And so when he came into my life, I was ready and willing to love again. Yeah. And he even said to me, he's like, how did you do that so quickly? I'm like, honey, I've been working on it for 3.5 years through the court. So it is very important to do that kind of work and to have people that support that kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's lovely and such a great note to end on. Just, really that empowerment piece and that perspective that you have a beautiful life waiting for you after divorce. And I 100% agree with it's so great to have someone who's impartial because, yes, we can call our friends or family members when we're having a hard time, but sometimes they just help us spiral more unintentionally because they're so emotionally involved. And so having someone who can say, you're valid in what you're feeling, and now what are we going to do about it is so super important, so you keep moving forward. So Becky, thank you again so much for being on today and sharing all this info. Listeners, head to the show notes. You're going to be able to check out all of her social media and her websites. I'll make sure we have her website in there so you can go and find those 100 divorce terms, so you can grab that up if that's something you're interested in. But again, thank you for your time, and listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time on the next discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce Discussions podcast. If this was helpful, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next conversation. Visit thedivorcesupportcollective.com to explore resources and connect with our professionals. Until the next discussion, remember, you don't have to navigate this alone.